Hey folks, Colin here from Something's Recording, and today I'm going to show you one tip for fatter electric guitars. So we're going to be talking about distortion today, but before we dive in, if you are ready to go a little bit deeper into the mixing process and really start to hone your workflow, then I have just the thing for you. It is my 7-step mixing checklist. This is a simple PDF that will guide you through the entire mixing process, step by step, to get you professional, radio-ready mixes without the hassle and without the guesswork. It is completely free, and you can download it below using the link in the video description. Now let's jump in here and start looking at some fat guitars. So what we're going to be using, the technique we're going to be using here to fatten up our electric guitars, is to use 2 distortions instead of just 1. So let me play you the finished guitar sound, the finished electric guitar sound. I'm going to play you just a couple instruments we're working on here. This isn't even a finished recording. This is a tracking session we're still working on. So I'm just going to play you a couple of the instruments here, a couple of the guitars and keys all together, and then we'll solo up in on these guitars. Let me make sure our limiter's on so it's loud enough for you to hear. Okay, here is a couple of our guitars and keys. Focus in on our electric guitars here. So this is the guitar sound that we ended up with, the tone that we decided for these 2 electric guitars. They were supposed to be driving guitars, kind of plugging along with the song. Let me show you where we started when we tracked these guitars. So it wasn't the greatest tone when we started off with these guitars, but it got the idea in and it got the part down through the song. So what we decided to do was fatten up these guitars, but get rid of all that mud, because it was kind of a thick sound to begin with, but it was thick in a bad way. It was a lot of low mid, muddy sound building up in that kind of 200 area. And that's not what we want. We want the guitars to be heavy and we want them to be fat, but we want it to be good. We don't want it to be that, kind of heavy sound that's going to give your head a headache, right? When you have too much of that 200 hertz area. We want it to be a big sound, but that's going to drive the song and kind of pump with the song. So the first thing that we reached for on these guitars was the pedal board plug-in inside of Studio One, and we reached for the Tube Dreamer, which kind of, that tube screamer kind of sound. So a little bit of a distortion pedal here, or a drive pedal. We have our drive pretty low. On one, it's at 3%, and on the other one, it is at 1%. So a little bit different settings on each guitar. That's just so we keep the width and they don't kind of narrow up as we put the same sounds on each of them. Our levels, making sure that we're the same before and after, are pretty close. And then our tone is at about 88% on both of them. Yeah, 88% on both of them. So edging on towards keeping that high end in there so it doesn't get too muddy. So this is how we're getting rid of that muddiness, but still getting that fatness, right? So we're adding that drive to fatten up our guitars and keep that thick sound, but we're using our tone knob to make sure it's thick in a good way and it's not going to give you a headache from too much of that kind of 200 hertz area. So we'll start without, and I'll add the pedal board in. You can hear how our guitars change. So that plug in there kind of helped fix the tone a little bit, right? It made them a lot less muddy. We got a little bit more of the top end on the drive area on the picking, but it wasn't quite heavy enough for us. We still wanted to go fatter. So the next thing we decided to pull in was the red light distortion plugin here inside of Studio One. So it's the distortion plugin that comes stock inside of Studio One, not reaching for a guitar pedal, so it's not a guitar pedal type plugin, not the Tube Screamer type plugin here. So then we pulled this in. Let me turn these on here so we can go over the settings. It's on the second stage here, so a little bit heavier, mixes at 100%. We're not using the lower high frequency cuts or anything. We're pushing a little bit more on the input amplification. No drive or anything, so this is at complete zero here. We're just making sure we're using the second stage here on both of them to get a little bit more of that distortion, a little bit more of that heaviness as we push into the amplification on it. And one more thing, we're using the hard tube setting. So we'll start without, and we're going to kick this in. Take a listen to how our guitars change. So we kick that red light distortion in, and it really opens up our top end on the guitars, right? They become way less smutty. They start to open up, shine a little bit on the top end, but they're still thick, and we get so much of that fatness from that kind of fuzz distortion that we're getting from this red light distortion type plugin. So one more time, and I'm going to A/B both plugins here. So we'll turn on and off the pedal board, so our Tube Screamer, Tube Dreamer type plugin, and the red light distortion at the same time. Take a listen to how our guitars go from being really dull and really muddy sounding to becoming fat and fuzzy and big and powerful inside our mix. So we'll start without, and then we'll kick them both in. These two distortions here really help these guitars come alive and really help them start to shine and fattens them up and gives them a ton of power to contribute to the mix. So it really takes them from a dull guitar sort of sound, dull and muddy and too thick, right? It's kind of giving you that headache frequency range around 200, 300. It takes them to being open, shimmery, right? It's got that nice high fuzz on it, but it's still got some thickness and it's still nice and fat, but in a good way. So now we're going to put them in with the rest of our instruments. We got some diamond guitars, we got a verb guitar, we got our acoustics, and we have our piano as well. So here's with the rest of the instruments, and we'll do another A/B on our two plugins. You can hear how they really help to thicken up our arrangement, and they really help to keep things fat without overdoing it, right? So they start to serve their purpose as drive guitars. There you have it there, one tip to fatten up your guitars. So next time you're working with your guitars, if you're not quite satisfied with your tone, if it's not quite big enough for you, try using two separate distortions instead of pushing everything into one distortion. I hope that was helpful for you. Like I said at the beginning of the video, if you are ready to take your mixes to the next level and start dialing in your workflow, then I have just the tool for you. It's free. It's my 7-step mixing checklist. Download it below and start creating more professional mixes in less time. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.